The Celtics start their new season today with a game against the Memphis Grizzlies. Preseason game 1. We finally get to see what the unproven Celtics look like. But before we get to watch that, I decided that now would be the perfect time to do a season preview. And I brought in in my opinion, one of the best all NBA covers there is. Definitely crushing it on YouTube right now. Someone I respect a bunch, Mr. Jason Timpf. How's it going, Jason?
Adam, it's good to see you, man. I was joking with you before we got started that it's time for you to enter into a different phase of fanhood where you're just having fun rooting for the team rather than being looking forward to June constantly. So I think this is gonna be a fun team, man. I'm excited to preview them with you.
Yeah, I'm really excited about. I love it when you get a guy that's unproven and then they pop and they're like, oh, dude, I can see him being a rotation piece on a championship version of this team. So one of those guys, just one, would make the whole season worthwhile for me. I'll talk about who I feel that might be later. But on the other side of it, it's just fun to watch a team that actually, when the wins matter in terms of like emotionally, like the Celtics we've watched the last 2-3 years, the wins matter at the end of the year and they mean something. But it's like you kind of come into every playoff series expecting to progress. You kind of come into the NBA Finals feeling like they've got a chance of winning. This team, if they beat the Lakers, it's going to mean a lot, especially because like if you have a win against LeBron and Luka and you've got Luka Garza anchoring the floor for like 15 minutes of the game, dude, that's bragging rights right there. So I'm excited for those little nuances. I can't say I'm looking forward to this front court though.
Yeah, it's funny because the shoe was on the other foot last year. I'm rooting for a Lakers team led by Austin Reeves with no LeBron, or was it 2 years ago that they beat you guys without any of their stars? But it's kind of part of the issue with the Eastern Conference sometimes is like you can run into these stretches of the schedule where you have 5 or 6 games in a row where you're going to win by 12 to 15 points, and then even when you get into the playoffs, it's like, oh, here's our first round series against this team that has no chance to beat us. Versus out in the West, where it's like kind of like every night feels like an important game, and then you get into the postseason, and like every first round series is a bloodbath. And now, like what'll be fun, to your point, every win this year is going to feel like a major accomplishment. It's going to be something that's going to be. I was actually recording with some Suns guys earlier this morning, and I mentioned that this phenomenon I've been seeing from Mavericks fans, where they've been talking about how they're like, yeah, like we love Luka, we're mad at Nico, but like it's going to be fun rooting for Cooper Flag because he's kind of like this competitive, defensive-minded, like every game he's going to play super hard type of dude. And I think Suns fans are going to be in a similar boat. Like you're going to miss Kevin Durant at the end of a game who can go win it at the buzzer with, elite shot making, but night to night, watching Dylan Brooks compete, watching Ryan Dunn get into a dude's jersey, they're going to enjoy rooting for him. And that's the thing, is like you guys obviously don't have the big picture potential you've had in recent years, but I think this is going to be one of your more fun regular seasons to just cover the team because there's going to be so much more interesting stuff to get into on a night to night basis.
Yeah, and you get to a point, and you must have had this covering the Lakers before you kind of went big picture stuff. You get to a point where you've said everything good that can be said about a team. It's like I've broke down their playbook 3 or 4 times this year. Wrote every which way. Last season, I must have wrote about Luke Kornet's impact at least 18 times. And I'm like, dude, I don't know what to say anymore. I don't know how to talk about this team in a new way. So now it's going to be refreshed. It's kind of nice because it gives us so much more scope. And we'll get into some of that scope in a moment. But it does give you so much more scope to dive in and be like, right, this is a whole new team with a whole new outlook. And I can be a bit grumpy from time to time now and feel justified.
Yeah, there's only so many times you can be like, oh, well, yeah, Tatum's advantage creation was great, and our drive and kick attack just completely annihilated this team again. Like, I'll see you guys on Thursday for the same thing. It's the burden of success in a lot of ways because like you guys were literally a machine. You guys were a machine, man. Like I literally been talking about this with Warriors fans with Horford. Like I'm like, you guys are. This is a guy who's been playing some of the best drive and kick basketball in the league for the last couple of years. Like you guys are going to love watching this guy. Like you guys had kind of mastered modern drive and kick basketball. And so it just was chewing up teams and spitting them out for years there.
Mazzulla, I will give him, and I've been saying this a lot actually, Mazzulla, I'll give him credit because he came into a team in a really tough situation. I think Mike Brown's kind of walking into a team like this in New York where the foundations were built by other people, and the principles that were successful were other people's principles. And you don't want to change those foundations or those principles. You just want to add tweaks to them to kind of fine tune it to how you believe they can be successful. Mazzulla got to do that. I think that those little tweaks he made did lead to. I like Mike Brown's version of this, where he calls it the spray offense. It did lead to like this amazing spray offense for Boston, that drive and kick. But and now we're going to see Mike Brown do the same. He's going to come in and see whatever principles Thibodeau left behind and kind of tweak them. And we already hear about the tempo they're playing at.
Yeah, the pace stuff.
Yeah, and I feel like, just to tie it in, I feel like now Mazzulla's, and I wrote about this the other day, it was Mazzulla's now getting an opportunity to coach a team in his image. And I feel like a lot of the messaging coming out of Boston right now is, I know to use Jalen Brown's words, it's been a track meet. It's been, these guys are running all up and down the floor. So I do feel like that drive and kick game is either going to go to a whole new level again, because they've got no other choice than to consistently lean on the 2 or 3 sharpshooters they have, or they're going to move away from it completely and just become this high intensity rim pressure team that uses the perimeter more as a release valve.
Yeah, you had mentioned before we got started today, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this later on the show, but you were like, you just need one guy to pop really in order to change the future fortunes of this team. And I know you have a guy in mind, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but like, I'd argue like similarly schematically, like this is a year for Mazzulla to explore stuff to see as proof of concept what he can implement in future iterations of the team when you have a better front court and you have Jayson Tatum back. So like, for example, like different transition principles like you're talking about. A big one that I'm assuming we're going to talk about today is just like the concept of an Anthony Simons type of guard in this system. Like, what is it like? You know, as much as I love Derek White, he's not exactly what I would call like a dynamic downhill ball handler. And Anthony Simons isn't the best version of that, but he's a guy that can really bring an element to the initial part of the offense that Jrue Holiday and Derek White didn't really bring. So that's going to be, what a cool experiment. Like, you guys, with free of any consequences, because there's no delusions of grandeur here, you can be like, let's see what this looks like with a guy like Anthony Simons running a pick and pop action with Luka Garza and screaming downhill into the lane with real dynamic pick and roll scoring, and, you know, starting our offense that way. Like, we just get to see what it looks like. Super high volume Peyton Pritchard, something that we haven't got to see a ton of over the last couple years. Like, there's just so many different little things that we're going to see. Like, I think we talked a little bit about the front court before we got started. Like, Mazzulla is going to have to get gimmicky with the defense, and he may, through that process, find a couple of things that he then translates to future iterations of the team. So it's like one giant laboratory season to kind of test a bunch of stuff and just see a bunch of things and determine if any of it is worth translating to future iterations of the team.
And that's the exciting part, right? Like you mentioned with Simons, I'm of the belief that Simons won't be on this team by the trade deadline, just because the value's not there for the Boston to keep him around after then, unless they're planning on re-signing him. And for as good as he is, what I always say, like, I call him single skill guys. Simons isn't a single skill guy, but he's a single side guy. So he plays great on one side of the floor, right? And he's on like $25 million a year. I don't think the value's there for Boston when you've already got close to 40-50% of your cap committed to Jayson and Jalen. Keeping Simons around long term doesn't really make financial sense. Unless he's going to take less over longer, then I'd see him getting flipped. But to your point, he's a prototype for a guard that you could then go and explore an opportunity for, be it through the draft or be it through a trade elsewhere around the league. And seeing how he works in those instances, whether it's to be coming off drag screens in transition, as you said, coming off pick and pops, just getting downhill on stampede catches, whatever it is, just having that opportunity to iterate through different ideas with him and then see how it holds up defensively as well, and how much of having that offensive minded guard impacts the defense. And if you think you can still build a championship team around it, that's exciting, especially on a shorter sample size where you know that it's not here forever. It's here for a good time, not a long time. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like, for all of whatever offensive limitations you want to talk about with Jrue and Derek, And I think they're both really good offensive players, to be clear. But like having just two staunch backcourt defenders was a foundational part of what made Boston great for a long time. And so, yeah, like you're going to get to see what it looks like. Is this something, can we still maintain the necessary level of defensive competency with this type of skill guard on the floor? Can we, through our culture, turn a guy like Anthony Simons into a reasonably good defender? You know, you have a track record of that with guys off your bench. I think Sam Hauser is a classic example of a guy who like no one really looked at as an elite defensive prospect, but like he's been solid in a Boston jersey as part of your culture. It's a test of your culture as much as it is a test of what Anthony can do for you guys. And I think it's just going to be a lot of fun.
I do have Simons. I was looking at his defensive estimated plus minus numbers the other day because I think defense, and I don't know if you agree here, defense in terms of statistics is almost impossible to quantify because there's so many variables involved. Who was on the floor with you? What scheme were you running? Who were you defending? Who were you guarding for the majority? So I don't know if you use DPM very often, but it kind of takes all that into account and spits out an estimate. He's been below league out, like bottomed out towards the bottom of the league for most of his career. And the concern I've got is last season, I know the Trailblazers weren't a good team, but their identity was defensive, and they were one of the better defensive teams in the league for a stretch of that time last season. And he didn't adapt. He was still a sieve on that side of the floor. Now, the hope is that contract years coming into play. He's in a new situation. The Celtics have got enough leadership still there in Jalen and Derek and Jason being on the sidelines that he's held accountable enough to be a league average defender. But as we said, just even if he's not, there's still data points you can take away from that for future of building this team. So I'm okay with it either way. I do think that he's going to be the sixth man though. And I've been against that for most of the summer. I think that Pritchard has, if you've got the best six man in the NBA, moving him to the starting lineup doesn't really make enough sense for me to make that happen. But I also understand that Pritchard will happily step back down into that role next season. Simons, on the other hand, you can limit his defensive downside while maximizing his offensive upside, having him with that second unit.
Yeah, so there's several elements to the Portland situation. The beginning of his career, like foundationally when he was learning how to play NBA basketball, that was not a strong defensive culture. So that's part of a lot of ball handling responsibility. That's a big part of it. That'll turn just about any skill guard into a guy who's a sieve on defense. Boston can present to him a smaller ball handling role, which will actually allow them to hold him more accountable on defense. Kind of what we talked about earlier, just a test of Boston's culture to see if they can bring more out of him. I think a lot of it is going to be, schematic. So, okay, like, are we asking him to hedge and recover? Are we asking him in switches to funnel in a specific direction and pressure the ball, which obviously without backline rim protection can be brutal. That's the other thing too, is like perimeter defense on this particular team is going to be taxed in a different way because of the lack of rim protection. And that's an additional element to it. I'm with you. I'd start him. On the one hand, Pritchard is used to the role. I think Pritchard is more amenable to the idea of bouncing in and out depending on, lineup changes. Oh, Anthony's out tonight, I can start. Anthony's in tonight, I'm happy to come in off the bench. I don't think you necessarily want Pritchard. I don't think Pritchard necessarily sees the starting lineup as an opportunity to get the ball more, because I think Jalen Brown's going to have the ball a ton in that lineup. I also think there's the trade value piece of it. The more you start Anthony and make sure that he gets his opportunities, the better chance you have to get more asset return from him if you can demonstrate him as a winning basketball player in your system. And so I'm with you. I'd start him. And I think I don't expect Anthony to come in and be an elite defender, but let me just say that I have my eyes open to see if in Boston's system, where he has less ball handling responsibility and a stronger defensive culture, if there's an opportunity there to at least turn him into a guy who can do a job. Here's what we want you to do in this type of action. Okay, we're switching. Here's where we want you to send your ball handler. Focus on contain versus focus on pressure. I just want to see it. I just want to see what they can do with him. And maybe it's a huge disaster, but he was basically salary filler coming back in the deal. So if it ends up being a disaster, you just move on from him. He's an expiring salary. You're going to be able to get something for him.
And that's kind of where my head's at with him. Just This is, to me, it's a sweetener. It is literally, you order a coffee and somebody gives you some extra creamer, and you're like, awesome. It's not really good for me, but it's going to be delicious while I'm having it. Right, I'm going to have to do some extra miles later to burn it back up. One thing I want to translate this over to, though, and this is kind of building on a point you just made about not having the ball as much, will free him up to be a little bit more locked in on defense, both schematically and just in terms of utilizing some of that processing speed for defensive IQ rather than offensive IQ. Translating that over to Jalen Brown has also been a bit of a concern for me. Not because I think Brown isn't capable of this role, and I don't want any Jalen Brown fans in my mentions right now. It's more because everybody has a limit with how much workload they can shoulder, right? And the Celtics, one of the biggest losses this year is going to be Drew Holiday, obviously, the defense. And now Tatum is clearly the biggest loss, just before anyone again is in my mentions. So now Brown's going to be like this de facto point forward, but he's going to be charged with a lot of the on-ball creation, a lot of the shot creation, both for him and the playmaking for others. But he's also going to be needed for his on-ball defense on the perimeter, because we all know that you don't want to trust Jalen Brown in an off-ball defensive role. It's just never going to work out well consistently. So you put him on ball. But that workload then becomes, can you sustain being like this primary option on both sides of the floor consistently throughout the year? Because that's like MVP level production that you're asking from the guy that has primarily been like a 1B option throughout his career. So when we're looking at Simons and we're saying, oh, well, without the ball, he can be more focused on defense. And I know Jalen Brown is a wildly different and better all-around player, but it's still a massive workload to put on the guy's shoulders and expect him to have the year that people are expecting him to have. I've heard people say all NBA first team lock, and I'm like, dude, do you understand the amount of work he's going to have to put in just to be able to carry the water that's going to be asked of him? Have you kind of, has that thought process crossed your mind? Do you know how you can stand with it?
I actually was thinking about this the other day because I was watching the Suns, and they throw the opening tip, and Ryan Dunn gets up in Austin Reeves' jersey, and Dylan Brooks like literally starts hounding Rui Hachimura at half court. But you can tell Rui's like peeing down his leg because he's not used to this type of ball pressure, because he's always getting like literally the weakest defender playing the low man role is what he's usually facing. And I've been generally really keyed in on this idea of ball pressure as one of the foundational parts of modern NBA defense. That's mainly just because I look at NBA ball handlers as so incredibly talented that if you let them get comfortable, they're just going to go off. They're going to find a way to, even if they miss their first few shots of the game, if you allow them to be comfortable, they're going to eventually find their rhythm and they're going to start picking you apart. And I was actually thinking about Boston in this context because such a huge part of what made them so good was like Drew and Jalen were going to get in your shirt. And if you were a big forward like Luka, or if you were a smaller guard, it didn't matter. They were going to get up in your shirt and they were going to be physical, and it was going to make you uncomfortable from the opening tip. You take Drew Holiday out of the equation, and now you give Jalen Brown more ball handling responsibility. And this is where, like, I was actually thinking about this the other day because I was at the gym. I was at the gym doing a shooting workout, and I was listening to Hollinger and Zach Lowe in their Most Confusing Teams pod. I don't know if you checked that out. But I think Hollinger brought up Boston. One of them brought up Boston. I can't remember who it was. But Hollinger's like, is like Jalen Brown going to take 31 shots a game this year? And my initial reaction was like, why? Like, okay, so Tatum's out and Drew's out, but like Derek is still there. Peyton's there. He can take usage. We just talked about Anthony Simons. Anthony Simons damn near ran 1,000 pick and rolls last year. Like this team still has ball handling. So like, does he move to the top of the list? Yeah. Does he become your number one option in crunch time? Sure. Is his usage going to tick up some? Yeah. But I don't think this is going to suddenly go to Jalen Brown hero ball. Like, as a matter of fact, I think that'd be stupid. And frankly, I'm pretty sure Joe Mazzulla behind the scenes is teaching this team to not do that. So like, I as much as I like am excited to see Jalen be at the top of the scouting report and see how many times he looks like game 5 versus the Knicks versus how many times he looks like game 6 versus the Knicks. I'm excited to see all of that, but I don't think this is going to be some sort of dramatic difference in ball handling responsibility to where he just has no reserves to play defense. And if he does, frankly, I think that would reflect poorly on Jalen. I think this team still has enough ball handling to where they're going to, like to your point, they're going to need him to be the guy who guards the ball. And so I think you could see a little bit of a downtick there, but I don't see any reason why he shouldn't still be able to keep his ball handling responsible in a reasonable window of touches and then still be an elite on-ball defender.
So that was going to be my follow-up was, in my opinion, because obviously I don't claim to be an expert, in the opinion I was going to be, my stance is I would much rather him prioritize his point of attack defense and prioritize his play finishing and allow the playmaking to become more egalitarian, right? As you mentioned, there's multiple dudes on that roster you can run a pick and roll with. There's also going to be new guys stepping up that might showcase their ability to create off secondary cuts or whatever that may be, if you come in second side actions. However, they can facilitate playmaking. Doesn't have to come on the initial entry. It doesn't need to come in. Ideally, it wants to come in the first 8 to 10 seconds of the shot clock, because that's how you get early offense. It's much easier to play that 0.5 basketball that everybody seems to be preaching these days, but it doesn't have to. There are ways that you can create playmaking off of your role players just moving correctly. But in the same sense, I feel like because of the amount of criticism Brown's had over his handles over the years, over his assist to turnover ratio, there's got to be a part of him that's like, I'm going to play within the confines of what Mazzulla's asking, but at the same time, we're not really building any championship habits this year, and half the dudes on the roster are not going to be here at this time next year. I'm going to prove some dudes wrong. I'm going to prove that I can, and that's where the concern comes in, because it's not so much a lack of professionalism. It's more like dude, I'm a Supermax player, and I'm a multi-time, like I'm a champion, I'm a multi-time all-star, and y'all still sleeping on the way I can go left or the way I can create. Part of me feels like there's going to be stretches of the season where he does take on that bigger role just to shut people up. And that's when the defensive concern comes in again, because there's no one behind you that can mop up the mess.
I think this is where the culture piece is going to come in, because like there's two different directions this season can go. There's we're going to kind of lose a little bit of our defensive identity because everybody who was in these strong defensive roles is suddenly taking on more ball handling responsibility. Everyone, like Jalen Brown's going to go up a notch. Peyton Pritchard's going to go up a notch. Derek White's going to have to run more pick and rolls this year. Like everyone's going to have to go up in their ball handling responsibility. What if everyone ticks down in their defensive attentiveness and effort, and all of a sudden we start dropping games, and the belief in the big picture goal starts to fade, and now all of a sudden we're a 38-34 win team, and Jalen then at that point, as you're winning at that pace, Jalen goes, screw it, I'm going to put my numbers up, and then that could be a direction the season goes, right? There's another direction the season can go, and that's okay. We're Joe Mazzulla has a really strong cultural control of the team. We start playing some good basketball, like the egalitarian playmaking you mentioned. Everyone is really invested in defense still. There's this heavy emphasis on transition. I love the stuff you were talking about with early offense. I think the entire point of running action in the half court is to get an advantage. And so if you can get an advantage out of a kick ahead pass to where guys are trailing the play and attacking closeouts, and you're just playing drive and kick out of a transition push, I think that's such a great way to avoid any of the big picture playmaking deficiencies after Tatum's out. But all of a sudden you're like, let's say you're 20-14 after 34 games and the culture is strong, and all of a sudden, like, you get a report from Tatum that's like, oh, he's 2 months out from being ready to play. And wait, we have this deal lined up where we can flip Anthony Simons and we get a center back. And, like something along those lines. And all of a sudden you're looking at this and you're like, wow, okay, like we have an opportunity here to maybe make a run here at the end of the season. Yeah. That's where that path bifurcates. That's going to be the interesting part of this Celtics season. Is it going to go the route of we're building towards something in the big picture, Tatum returning, we're flipping Anthony for a big and some salary relief, and, we're moving in this direction, or the wheels come off early and Jalen Brown just takes the keys and runs off into oblivion? That's gonna be one of the interesting kind of turning points of this particular season.
The fact you used Oblivion was quite funny to me. I do agree though, and I think that I'm gonna save the Tatum talk to the end because I feel like that's the biggest asterisk on this whole season for Boston's. But I do think that how early he can come back and what version you're getting back, and I'll share thoughts on this in a bit, changes everything. It changes the entire way you approach this season. It changes the moves that you could potentially make at the deadline or moves that you make leading up to the deadline. Obviously, they still have the 15th roster spot wide open as well. That could change the type of player you're looking to add to round out that roster later in the year. Obviously, they're keeping it open for the salary saving purposes, which they've done for the last few years. But I think now it's time to talk about this front court, right? I think we've focused on the perimeter a bit, and now we need to get into the bad. We've looked at the good, the bad being the front court, complete front court. But Sam Hauser has been incredibly disrespected this summer. People have spoke about him like he's just a throw-in in a deal, and I get it. He's not a star. He's not an all-star, a superstar, or anything like that. He's arguably top two, I'd say top two, top three of the best movement shooters in the NBA. Not just stationary movement shooting, which is a completely different skill set, and he's also a considerably higher degree of difficulty. And not only can he be one of the best movement shooters in the league, he's also, as you alluded to earlier, a very reliable defender against multiple positions as well. He can switch. And because of that, he's one of the only guys I want to take out of this front court discussion and be like, you know what, you're okay. You go stand on that side. Everybody else, you guys are going to be rough. It's going to be tough. And the big man position, as you've mentioned a few times, you said, like, if you get a center, everything changes. It's kind of where it's bad, right? You've got Neemias Queta, you've got Luka Garza, you can slow Chris Boucher up, and you've got Xavier Tillman playing some small ball five. Those four dudes are a nightmare for me. I'm like, dude, Queta's
yeah, I want to hear the Queta take. You were telling me before you're out on Queta.
yeah.
I want to hear your take. You've been following him a lot more closely.
I think Queta's really he's a really good prospect. I think he's a solid developmental big, and he's shown flashes of being this dude that can be a high level rim runner in the NBA, especially off the bench. And he's impressed in small stretches of starts for the Celtics over the last 2 years. There was a West Coast run, not this season, but the season before. And he had some big games. I think he really balled out. I think it was against the Clippers. I might be wrong there, but it was on that same West Coast stretch. And he's had good moments, but I find that his overall understanding of when to bite on defense is quite bad. Like, and a lot of athletic or explosive bigs tend to bite on pump fakes early in their career. Robert Williams had the same issue. If I remember correctly, Clint Capella struggled with that during his early days as well. But he bites a lot. I find that his positioning work, he gets faked. Like, eye movement seems to move him. Like, you won't see any shoulder fakes or any body feints, but he'll still take a step. So, like, he's getting faked out by eye movement. I just find his positioning is really flawed in terms of just needing work. His understanding of how to control angles. And that's been a big point of emphasis for me for a few years, because I feel like one of the main reasons Al Horford is still such a high level defender at his age, and obviously the athleticism is on the down curve now, is because he understands how to control and manipulate angles. He understands how to take away a driving lane before that driving lane has even been exploited. And going from that to going to someone like Neemi, where I'm like, you're going to get pulled out of position easily. You're going to bite on offensive movements quickly, and you're a foul machine. Plus, you're in the 55th percentile for finishes around the rim among all bigs in the NBA, and you cannot shoot. So you need to be a lot better of a rim finisher to be a viable threat as a rim running big. He can block shots, he's got good timing on his blocks. But if you can anchor a drop defense and be a high level finisher at the rim on the other side of the floor, and your prototype is rim running, I mean, what are we doing here at that point? And that's kind of my concern.
Yeah, and I mean, he's going to be playing in substantially less talented lineups this time around too, which create, more space on his roles where he's been struggling to finish, which provide more resistance on the perimeter where he's defending in these schemes, right? So, like, I think I love the point you're making about, like, positioning on defense, because I think the Horford's such a classic example of this, because what ends up happening with this type of big a lot is you'll see some blocked shots where you're like, oh, there's only a handful of dudes who can make that play. But the problem is that if he plays 16 minutes, he's gonna be, defending on what, somewhere between 25 and 40 defensive possessions. And so like the one or two highlights doesn't matter if he's out of position 7 or 8 times during that stretch. It's so much more about like the long game on defense. If I'm consistently in the right position, yeah, I'm going to give up some shots on this spot of the floor. Yeah, I'm going to have to concede this floater in order to maintain defensive rebound position on the rolling big or whatever it might be. But I'm winning the war rather than winning the battle, if that makes sense. And that's the kind of the give and take with defensive centers all around the league. And I've dealt with this with backup center because the Lakers have. You're welcome to my world, Adam. I've been dealing with the worst center rotation in the league for a very long time, outside of Anthony Davis, obviously. But like it's one of those things where I think like the most important. None of these guys are going to be starting centers for you in the future, right? Like we can all agree on that. The Celtics aren't winning a championship unless they get a starting caliber center in there somewhere, and none of these dudes are that guy, right?
So yeah, that's 100% in.
Yeah. So if you're looking for a reliable backup, there's a reason why Kornet took that role over the years. It's his positioning. He just always was in the right spot. He was always doing the right thing. And with that being the case, I think a guy like Neemias, to your point, is he's just nowhere near where he needs to be at developmentally to be that higher floor option as a backup center. And so that's kind of the interesting thing about looking at a guy like Luka Garza, for example. So we obviously don't agree we obviously don't think Luka Garza is going to be your starting center of the future. And you and I were talking before we started recording about his defensive limitations, and it's certainly significant.
It's ugly.
But like, is there a version of this where he is a rotational level, like 8th or 9th man who provides a 5-out look in a Tatum, Brown, Garza 3-4-5 kind of configuration? That's on the table. So this will be a really interesting kind of test case in this season to see if Luka can find a achievable defensive role under Mazzulla and how he operates. Can he fill the role that Al Horford filled for you guys on offense as like a above the break spacing 5 who could make driving kick reads? And I'm really excited to see that. I think it's going to be an interesting test case.
Defensively with Garza as well, one of the things that I really liked was if you watch him play offense, his footwork's solid. And that footwork translates over to the way he 2-9s on defense. And I think that and the only reason this has come to my mind is because I vividly remember writing it down in my notebook was like 2-9ing is seamless for him, whereas Neemi's a bit more clunky. He knows he needs to cleanse, so he'll step out, but he just doesn't have the same fluidity of foot movement. So when he steps out and both feet are on the floor, all the gravity is going right in. So if he needs to change direction, it's just a bit more difficult. And the reason I bring this up is because Garza and Neemias are about the same size. Garza's a 7-foot dude too, but he's just got more fluidity of movement, which makes him a more reliable weak side shot deterrent. If you've got him weak siding and he's he's outside of the paint, you feel more confident about him being able to maneuver his way into the right position to contest a shot or even deter a shot than what you do about Neemias. The only upside Neemias got is he's way more explosive. So he's going to be able to leap higher. He's going to be a little bit more of a, oh, damn, this dude's running at me and I know he can jump about 84 feet in the air. I don't know what I'm going to do. Whereas Garza is going to be more timing based. I do think the upside there with him as a backup is solid. And I think that Queta is going to have a good NBA career, but I think he's being thrust into a role that's too big for the level of player he is right now. And it's sink or swim. And that's kind of unfair to him. It's also unfair to the Celtics to be in that position, but it's just where they found themselves.
Really quickly, because I have another thought I want to get to. Do you think Queta is going to start?
Yeah, I think he's the guaranteed starter.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
At least to begin.
At least to start the year. Okay.
Yeah.
So I've been really keyed in on this idea for a while, but I call it the Karl Anthony Towns problem. But I think that there is a huge difference between being a physically limited defender and a mistake-making defender. So if you're a physically limited defender, so let's just put Luka Garza in this camp, okay? But I can count on you to get beat in this direction because you're going to follow the scheme. I can count on you to, I asked you to, we can kind of apply this to Anthony Simons as well. I can count on you to follow the game plan. Like, okay, this guy we're pressing up, forcing him to drive in this direction, or this guy we're playing him flat and we're playing off and we're forcing him to take pull-up jump shots with a late contest, or like help defense responsibilities. Like, okay, in the game plan, when you're matched up with this guy, here's how far you're sinking into the lane. Here's what you need to worry about with closeouts, things along those lines. If I can count on a guy, even if he's physically limited, to at least do those things every possession, I can plan for it. And now as a team, we have a better chance of surviving. The Karl-Anthony Towns problem is he'll randomly just throw some crazy hedge out 32 feet from the basket and get way out of position when the guy's not even using the ball screen yet. Next thing you know, he's rejecting it, and now there's nobody in the lane and he's getting a layup. And like, I know that's not the game plan because on the very previous possession, he did something completely different. Like, Karl-Anthony Towns is an extremely mistake-prone defender that you can't count on actually being anywhere in any situation on the floor. And so as a result, there's like I find that type of defender to be more damaging. And so when I talk about guys like Anthony Simons and, you know, Luka Garza in this case, and whether or not Joe Mazzulla can form achievable defensive roles, what I'm really looking at there is, are they mistake prone? Not necessarily are they physically capable of the job. Because to your point, we talked about it before the show, Luka's not going to put a highlight reel of defending in space. That's not something he's going to be great at. But he's going to have to defend in space at points during the season. And is he at least going to follow the game plan and be in the right spot? Those are the kinds of things that I think matter way more than whether or not you have the physical traits, but you're mistake making. We were talking about with Queta, like his rim protection is mitigated by defensive positioning, by being in the right spot. And so like that, we talk about read and react basketball so much on the offensive end of the floor, but it's every bit as prevalent on the defensive end of the floor.
And to add to that, it's also the way of, if you know that you've got a reliable defender, in terms of, as you said, just they're not mistake prone, you build your defensive system to help counter the fact that they're defensively limited in terms of physicality, right? So you have your guards you have more gap help come around them. You pinch on actions where it's like a cut from the slot or a cut from the wing. You have guys pinch in, and you put more length there to try and take away the amount of space that you're asking those limited guys to defend in. And then if you trust that they're not going to be mistake prone, then overall the system should work because you've put pieces around them to alleviate some of those those physical limitations. And then you trust that the system will be adhered to. And I think that's a really good point, because then when you do have a mistake prone big, but has the physical capability, you don't have those same counters in order, because you trust in them not to make a mistake, and then they do something stupid, and now there's a blown wide open possession. You do that 2-3 times a game, and now we're staring down the barrel of them. Yeah, that's a really good mentality. I like that.
And you can't. There's nothing you can do from the bench. There's nothing you can do as a tactician to cover for a guy that's not going to do what you ask him to do. I mean, like to me, Nikola Jokic is the perfect example. And obviously, Nikola Jokic will have extended stretches of regular season basketball where he just doesn't care. And I mean, we're even seeing it in this preseason where Jokic is like, yeah, you just have that layup. I'm not really interested in fighting you there. But like every time they get to the postseason, Jokic just suddenly turns into like a slightly above average defender, literally just because he's always in the right spot. He does his job within the scheme. He gets up to the level. He's active with his hands. He because he's a person who can follow the game plan, it opens up schematic versatility for David Adelman, and now he can run different types of coverages and zones and things along those lines. Like Karl-Anthony Towns is a more physically gifted like athlete in terms of mobility than a guy like Jokic, but Jokic is a better defender than Cat because he's way less mistake prone. It's just an idea that I've been really keyed in on, because like the Nuggets are just the perfect example for me. They guarded Oklahoma City as well as anybody did in the postseason last year, better than Minnesota did. They guarded them, as well as Indiana did. And a big part of it was they just got smart defenders that know where to be. Now, to be clear to your point from the beginning, I'd much rather have a physically gifted defender that is also a guy that knows.
Oh, of course.
Like that's what you want. That's the idea. But like, yeah, in the absence of that as an option, I'm really curious to see with Anthony and with guys like Luka, Garza, like where are they at this year in a scheme that's going to give them specific jobs, and can they execute them without making mistakes?
I will say this: I like the Karl Anthony Towns problem. I also like the idea of calling it defensive IQ execution.
Yeah,
Like that's kind of like the encompassing discussion that we've just held, right? Like you basically if you have the IQ, can you execute, or are you just gonna have brain farts a few times a day?
if you're really quickly, like the simplest way to put it is like, if you have defensive limitations physically, you're going to have to concede something, right? Like
Yeah.
that's why a team like the Milwaukee Bucks gave up so many catch and shoot threes last year. Like they understood, like we're going to have to just funnel them into our size, and we're going to have to concede some of these kickouts, right? But like the flip side is you at least have some control over the shot profile of your opponent if you can game plan. But if you can't game plan, you have no control over the shot profile of your opponent. And you can't game plan unless you have guys that have high defensive IQs that are going to be in the right spot that you ask them.
You asked me before we went down this rabbit hole who I had as the starting big. So before we move on to the forwards, and then we'll wrap it up with some Tatum talk, and we'll let everyone get out of here. Who do you have as Boston's starting five?
I think I would try Garza, and I would lean into kind of like a switching 5-out spacing drive and kick attack. But I don't, to be clear, you don't have a good option. So it's not, I don't think there's a strong case to make for anybody. Chris Boucher is obviously your best like switching 5 look that gives you just kind of like a strong defensive switching foundation. Obviously, Queta gives you your best like kind of drop type of foundation. Garza gives you your best offensive foundation. So it just kind of depends on what you're exploring there. But I mean, if I would, like you had mentioned Queta to start the year, I would be stunned if they don't at least try several different starting centers this year just to see what it looks like.
It's malpractice at that point.
Yeah.
Like I'm hoping it works out that way. And you don't know who they're going to pick up. And look, for anyone that's listening that says I've been against Queta all year, I think there's a lot he's good at, but I also think there's a lot he should be working on. Like if I'm him, I'd be the old school in me here, but I'd want him to add a drop step to his game. So when he catches the ball with his back to the basket, he actually understands how to create space off a drop step. When if I'm him, I'm working on understanding when and how I'm being manipulated in the pick and roll, where I'm being dragged into a position where I can be exploited because the hip flexibility isn't there for you to change directions on a dime. Work on the things that are actually going to accentuate your game. And I'm not saying he hasn't been. I don't know. I'm not nowhere near the locker room, but those are kind of the concerns I have coming in, where all the footage we're seeing is him messing around. And he was shooting threes in Europe earlier in the summer and was taking more mid-range shots. And it's just not translatable. Sometimes I'm just like, dude, I don't have that much confidence in this guy. Moving on to the forwards.
Well, really quickly, who would you start at center?
It's got to be near me, but I don't want it to be near me. I'm one of these people where I'm like, I like the idea that when you don't have elite talent, you want interchangeable talent, kind of like what we spoke about before the pod with the Pacers. And I think that the best way to have an interchangeable rotation there is to have Neemias as the starting 5, because then once your primary shooters come off the floor and the second unit's on the floor, at least you can still keep some space in that way because Garza's there. Because that's kind of where my mind's at with it.
That's a good point. And also, he's your only big that can credibly run drop. So, like, I would theoretically imagine that the eventual center that you guys will trade for or bring into the system will be someone who can run drop. Yeah. So it gives you some scheme consistency if you were to make a move at some point down the line. So there's some upside there as well. But to your point, it's just kind of slim pickings in that department.
It's ugly, is what it is. It's ugly. Mm-hmm. And it's the same at the forward rotation, right? So we mentioned Hauser, we can leave him out. You've mentioned Boucher as a 5. He could also be at the 4. I think I actually have him pegged as the starting 4 to begin the year. And I think that's fine. I think that, you want as much floor spacing as possible, especially with a guy like Neemias. You need to accentuate his size and lob threat, that vertical spacing that's on offer. But once you take away Boucher and you're like, right, Sam Hauser can play the 4, but you don't really want him there because then you're losing some of the value of him defensively. It's like, right, you can have Hugo Gonzalez, who I'm actually quite high on. He's a draft pick out of Europe. I'm actually quite high on, but I don't expect him to get heavy minutes straight off the bat. He's definitely an energy guy. If you want to play at the 3, you've got Josh Minott, which is the guy that I actually expect to pop this year. I think that Josh Minott's going to be a guy that really finds a way of sticking. He's got great length. Seems to be really good at, as you mentioned, getting
Really
up
good
there.
athlete. Yeah.
Yeah, can bounce. If his shot is real, if he can develop a reliable shot and he uses that length to be a system defender, a plus system defender, I think he's a guy that sticks beyond this current season. And then everybody else, I'm just like, I hope Hugo Gonzalez sticks as well. But Jordan Walsh, I'm out on. I don't know if you're a fan of Jordan Walsh. I'm not.
It's the jump shot that obviously is the sticking point. What I like about Jordan Walsh is he does all the stuff that you're asking a role player to do. There, he'll crash out of the corner. He'll compete on defense. He does all those little things. There's dozens of Jordan Walsh types around the league. It's like the bench wing forward that is like not good enough at any specific thing to really become a dude you are comfortable investing in long term. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw more Jordan Walsh than you'd think to start the year, just because of his familiarity in the system, though.
Oh, for sure.
Like that's going to be a big part of it. Like he's got an advantage over a guy like Minott just simply because he's been around and he's familiar with Mazzulla ball. But like Minott is your upside pick. He's a freaky athlete. He kind of represents, if you look at this team in recent years, once you get past Tatum and Brown, there is kind of a dearth of like hyper athletic forwards. You know what I mean? And so that just getting another guy like that in the rotation in the big picture would be super helpful. I like the idea of kind of leveraging Boucher at the 4 as like a defensive kind of upside to leaning to your offensive minded at backcourt, because like we can all agree, like as we look at this Boston roster, like if you're actually looking at ball handling, you go, Pritchard and Simons and Derek White and Jalen Brown. Like that's one of the better ball handling cores in the entire Eastern Conference. Still, even after everything that happened. So like you almost like the idea of leaning into length in the front court to just give yourself a better defensive floor with like that dynamic of Queta, where like, okay, if Queta is going to jump at pump fakes or over pursue ball handlers and pick and roll, we've got another athlete behind him that can kind of cover for some of his mistakes on the backside, right? I do like that idea as a foundational concept, but like similar to what we were talking about the center position, it's a lot of like kind of like flawed options that you're looking at there.
Yeah, it's the best of a bad bunch. And I think that Boucher is going to be solid. And like you said, the length helps, especially if you're trying to funnel or gap help, just to try and ease the pressure on Neemias there. But that's why I feel like Minott could be great as well. Walsh has got an incredible wingspan. Have you seen Walsh's wingspan? It's ridiculous.
Well, I know it's long, but what is it measured at? Have you seen it?
I don't even remember. I'm going to Google it right now. It was somewhat crazy. Jordan Walsh wingspan. I remember when he got drafted and I was trying to figure out how much of the wingspan it was. And I was like, I'm pretty sure, I'm 6'3", and I was like, I'm pretty sure his wingspan is like my height. And then I was like, how can someone's arms be my height? Do you know what I mean? So I've just Googled it now. So it is it's bigger than me. He has a 7'2" wingspan.
Wow, that's ridiculous.
Yep, according to Google, Jordan Walsh's wingspan is 7'2". So if you want length and you want to be disruptive and you want to be able to gap help without really giving up the opportunity where you overhelp and now there's a shooter open, you just have Jordan Walsh on the floor because he can gap help without moving his feet.
Mm-hmm.
The downside is, as you mentioned, the jump shot's not there. I do feel like sometimes, and I used to say this about Aaron Neesmith as well, and I was a big Aaron Neesmith fan, so it's not a knock necessarily. But I feel like he plays at 110 miles an hour when you need him to play at 75. And when you play that fast, your processing speed suffers for it. And then he needs to be a defensive event maker and then somebody that can knock down open shots. But when you're playing so fast, the events you're creating aren't the positive type. And then you're too gassed that now your shots are hitting front rim because your legs are dead because you've done some stupid stuff throughout the game.
Yeah, you can't slow down to take the time to knock the shot down or to process in the middle of the floor. Like we've all seen this type of guy. Like for me, that guy was Max Christie when he was with the Lakers. And I actually think Max has made some leaps and he's going to be a good player for Dallas this year. But like, I want to be like, dude, just slow down. Like, just take a deep breath and like let the defense will react to you if you just relax for a second. Like, get into the middle of the floor and like you're past your defender. Just take a second, read the floor, make a play. Like, yeah, there's a certain amount of that like youthful exuberance that can backfire for a high motor guy, and I think Jordan can get into that sometimes.
It's fun to watch, don't get me wrong. Like everybody loves the guy that hustles his ass off and is like diving for loose balls and isn't afraid to get a little bit annoying, but at the same time, it's like, dude, you've got a role to play, and that's what talking about, like working on. We mentioned this with Neemias. Very cautious of the time that this podcast is running for, by the way. So I am sorry. We mentioned this with Neemias, where it's like working on the wrong things or displaying the wrong things in opportunities that aren't related to the NBA game. So Neemias was shooting mid-range and 3-point shots in Europe. Jordan Walsh, Summer League, was barely shooting from the perimeter, and he was really crashing that glass and just trying to be super athletic and like really forceful with getting to the rim and finishing. And I think that's fantastic. But that role's not going to be there for you in the NBA. That role is going to be available for people ahead of you in that rotation. And I much would have rather have seen you showcase an improved 3-point jumper throughout that summer league, because then I'd feel way more confident about you coming into the season.
It's the PJ Tucker conundrum. It's like, we're cool with the corner crasher if you're a guy that I feel comfortable sticking on the other team's best player for, 30 minutes a game. But like, is Jordan that type of guy? No. So like you have to be transcendently great on defense to be that one-dimensional on offense. And ultimately, it's the Jared Vanderbilt kind of thing too. Like Jared Vanderbilt, I don't care if he only needs to get to like 35% from three, because when he's healthy, can be an elite point of attack defender, and that's a huge asset to the Lakers, right? So like, yeah, I'm with you. That's gonna be the turning point for him, is whether or not he can get to the point where he can hit corner threes, 36, 37%.
They need it, man. They need that Grant Williams replacement with size and length. An upgrade. Okay, we'll finish off here. We'll get it out of the way quickly. Tatum, do you think he comes back? And if he does, what are your concerns? And then I'll give you my concerns. You can tell me why I'm wrong or why I'm right, and then we'll let everybody.
So, seeing him as far along as he was in that video was kind of changed my perspective a little bit. I was kind of with the masses where everyone was like, this is stupid. Like, he should just sit out this year. Like, what are you even playing for? And my initial impression was like, yeah, like that makes sense. You're going to be playing in the highest leverage games late in the year. Like, that just doesn't make any sense to force Tatum back into that sort of situation. But one, he's further along than we originally thought he would be at this point. Two, we have to put ourselves in Tatum's head, which is that he's a psychopath basketball lover competitor. And so like that dude is just not, he just doesn't want to sit. He wants to play. And three, it's an element of trust. Like, trusting that if he does make the decision to go out there, he knows he's actually ready. And then from there, it's really about just managing the day-to-day. Like, okay, we brought him back. He's been practicing for 2 weeks and he's feeling some soreness. Okay, let's chill. But yeah, if he's been practicing for 2 weeks, full bore, playing 5-on-5, doing all the things, and he hasn't experienced any discomfort or setbacks, and then all of a sudden he goes another 2 weeks and like he's starting to look like Tatum again, and he goes like, hey, coach, I want to play, and it's March 1st, then like, he should play. Like, and maybe it looks like something where they have some more information around February and they're able to make some deal where they get a rotation level, like a real rotation level center, and suddenly it looks like a weak Eastern Conference and you've got an opportunity to thread the needle and make something happen there. So like, I've come around to like, I trust Tatum in his camp, and I trust the Celtics to make the right decision, and they'll talk about it. Like, everyone acts like them saying he wants to play this year means he's going to play this year. That's not what that means. It just means they're keeping their options open. And if they get to that point and he looks ready and he says, hey, coach, I'm ready, and the medical staff goes like, he looks like he's ready, and they're like, we want to play him, like, I defend that decision just because I know how much he loves basketball, and genuinely he looks further along than you would expect at this point.
So I'm exactly like you. I was in the exact same camp where Tyrese Halliburton got hurt later, got shut down for the entire season early. We don't care. He's not playing, right? And I was like, the Celtics should do this too. That's what the Celtics should do. They should follow that blueprint and be like, let's end this chatter now. He's not playing. Then I saw the video and I'm like, okay, I understand why they didn't. He's superhuman. He's just incredible. Now what I'm kind of getting at with people is, when he does come back, don't expect it to be pretty, because it's going to be, he's got to relearn to trust his body. He's got to relearn to embrace contact the same way without being fearful of hurting himself. And most importantly, he's got to get back to that level. And that doesn't happen in the gym. Your conditioning to an NBA standard doesn't happen in practice. You get to a certain point, but we've all heard enough NBA players say at this point, there's nothing like game fitness. Like you have to play. And we've all played our share of, well, most of us have played a share of competitive basketball at a certain level where you know that if you have a month away from the gym and you come back, you are gassed and you're like, dude, I don't realize how quickly I've fallen off. So you've got that to get through. And then you've got just the ramp up process, right? His shot's not going to be there. A lot are going to front rim. Then they're going to back rim while he just finds that range again. So bringing him back early makes sense, but only if you're willing as a fan to live with the process of those results until he gets to where he needs to be. I think if you're bringing him back and you're hoping that instantly sparks a run, then there's two, as you was talking about earlier, like it can split off, right? There's two ways that can go, just depending on how quick that adaptation process is.
Yeah, the trust in the physicality is a big part. I had a foot injury between my first 2 years in college where like I was healthy, but I wasn't like playing like myself for a little while. And the part of it is like I would have him work through a lot of that stuff behind the scenes, like have him playing 5-on-5 against your end of the bench guys, like a lot. Have him do that for like several weeks before you even consider having him practice or play with the main group. Like have him ease his way into that stuff. You don't want him working through that stuff while he's on the floor. But the last thing I'll say about it is like one of the things that I'm less concerned about with him is he's very big and strong and he has an extremely high basketball IQ and is very good at making easy reads. So like there's a certain amount of like he can get out there and just grease the wheels as like a connective playmaker and spot up shooter as he eases his way into some of the more advanced stuff. So like for a guy like him, I view Tatum as an extremely high floor player, even in his particular circumstance. So like, I don't think it's going to look like, you know, fat Luka where he's just missing a bunch of shots and being bad on defense. Like, I think it'll be a long journey from, you know, March 2026 Tatum to all NBA Tatum. Like that's going to take some time, but I don't think it's going to be as ugly as people think just because he's big, strong, smart, and can help teams play basketball without having to do a ton. I mean, we saw so many examples. I mean, the playoffs last year was a great example or 2 years ago, where like Tatum can kind of fall into a supporting role and be really good at it. So like that's part of his versatility and part of what made him the perfect superstar for that iteration of the Celtics. And so I actually think he could be better in the short term than people think.
That's fair. And I used to call him the metronome, right? Like in that championship run, he was the Celtics metronome. What I hadn't considered is he can lean into that quite early. And that's a really fair point that I'm probably going to have to dive into a little bit more because he did take that step back offensively in that championship run anyway. So now I wish I'd spoke to you earlier in the summer now, because then I would have had like this awesome newsletter piece I could have put out there. Anyway, you know, hindsight's I don't want to swear, hindsight's a pain. With that being said, I'm going to let you get out of here just because we've been talking for a minute, man. I told you 30 to 40, and that was before we even spent 30 talking before we started recording. Not that you need it because you are absolutely destroying YouTube right now, but if you want to let anyone know where to find you in case they live under a rock, then you can go ahead.
Dude, this has been a ton of fun. I've really enjoyed this pod,
Sure.
so no apologies necessary. For those of you guys who are interested in the show, it's at YouTube at Hoops Tonight. And then I'm most active on Twitter at _JasonLT, although I'm less active on Twitter than I used to be. But YouTube's the main spot, wherever you get your podcast under Hoops Tonight as well. Adam, dude, this has been so much fun, dude. I'm really excited for you as well as a Celtics fan. It's going to be a fun season, and I wish you the best of luck this year. And then hopefully we have a chance to chat a little bit further along in the season.
Oh, for sure. I'll be reaching out for sure. And I'll be watching. I'm definitely going to, whenever I see the word Celtics in one of your, I'll be looking straight in. Everybody make sure you're liking the pod. Make sure you subscribing to the newsletter, and we'll catch you later. Peace.